Hi, friends. Logan Clements here with the Better Events podcast. And this week's episode, we are thrilled to have our guest, Devon Pasha, joining to talk to us all about event design and get you thinking a little creatively about your upcoming events. You're going to learn what event design is, how you can implement it with some tangible examples. Listeners, we know you love that, and learn more about Devon's take on what you can do with your stage program, as well as just your planning process to inspire creativity and innovation using some of the key principles from event design. So without further ado, let's get into our episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Better Events Podcast. We are so thrilled to be with you today, and especially with our guest, which you're going to learn more about shortly. And actually, that shortly is right now because I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest, Devon. Devon Pasha, CMP and CED, is the founder and chief MC at DMP Creative LLC, where she transforms events into powerful tools for change through her unique blend of event design expertise and dynamic stage presence. With over 20 years of experience, Devon fuses strategy, creativity, and connection to ignite meaningful experiences that leave a lasting impact. As an award-winning speaker and MC, Devon captivates audiences with her thought-provoking storytelling and empowering messages on mental health, burnout, and industry innovation, all things that we need in our industry. So her keynote, Owning Your Scarlet Letter, inspires audiences to reframe challenges and spark positive change. Devon's Spark approach infuses every event with warmth, connection, and transformative energy, and sets her apart in the industry. A master certified event designer and CMP, she's also pursuing a master's in creativity and innovation at Drexel University while mentoring the next generation of event professionals. I love your bio because I think it shows how amazing you are and the amazing things that you're involved in. So thank you for being here. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, thank you so much for having me in the enthusiastic way you read that bio. It's such a wonderful opportunity to be with both of you. I know this is a long time coming, so happy to be here at the start of the new year, getting rolled into, second month, kind of in the middle of that. Hopefully it's not too dreary where everyone is. It's about 70 degrees here in South Texas. So I'm super warm and ready to share with you all. And thanks again for having me.
Yeah, a little more for our listeners about why we asked Devon. I got to see her speak live at WEC, which I always forget what it stands for, but it's World Education Congress, which is MPI's Meeting Professionals International's annual education event. And I will say that I loved what Devon had to say about event design, but I also, Devon, I haven't even told you this yet, but what stuck with me is you showed me how to properly peel a Post-it note. Now, I will say, I don't know if I remember how, but I think of you every time I'm like, Devon taught me and I debate every time. And it's, listeners, the way to properly peel it is to make it so it doesn't curl up. And the only way I know if I did it right is if it doesn't curl up. So
left to right.
Left to right, listeners. If you're on YouTube, she just demonstrated for everybody. So yes, and when she introduced me to the idea of event design, and it's just something that I feel like to do a pun on your approach, but it did spark some ideas for me about how I could implement it with my events. But we love to start broad on this podcast and just define some terms. So Devon, how do you define event design?
I know that's kind of a hard thing, a little tongue twister. The best way I can tell you about event design is to paint a picture for you. So Logan and Mary, if I asked you to go across my street right now and start building a building, would you just grab some materials from the front yard and go start hammering, nailing, and putting together a structure? Or would you stop and ask me a question?
I'd have questions.
Yeah, both of your so for people on YouTube, both of their faces I have many questions, and you can just see that sort of it's running, it's going. I'm you can see all that many questions. So event design is like that architect. An architect is allowed to ask as many questions as they like because they want to ask, well, what is the building? How much do we have to work with? What is its size? What is its main function? Who is it for? Right? They want to ask all these questions because they want the design of that building to reflect what it's meant to be used for. a hospital and an elementary school are going to look completely different. However, when we are told to go plan the event, most of us dust off a binder, run across the street, and start building. We don't stop to ask the questions. Event design is like being the architect. Event planning is like taking the plans and going to build the building. Except for many of us don't wait for the blueprints. We just go and start. So that's the best way to explain event design. Hopefully that gives a great visual to your listeners and everyone watching on YouTube, that this is essentially what event design is. And what I hope everyone gets out of this is the ability to learn how to ask the powerful questions to get what you want so you can start with those blueprints.
I love that, because as you were describing that, I'm thinking, this is our job. Like, we should absolutely be asking questions. But then I'm like, hold on, because like you were saying in your example, the reality is that sometimes we just get so much into it that we're just like ready to execute and do the thing. So that's a wonderful way to paint the picture to start off. So thank you for that. And kind of, as we're building on this, who can implement event design strategy? Clearly, it's a lot of event professionals, right? But like,
yeah, but
who's it for?
anyone can do this. Anyone should be able to do this. I think there's two things that we need to kind of unlearn. The first thing we need to unlearn is asking questions is bad or challenging. And I think a lot of us, and I think say this especially about women in our industry, when we pause to ask questions, for whatever reason, we're told that we're a little challenging. And so we don't think that event design is for us because it requires asking a lot of questions. So anyone can do this and anyone should do this. And the reason anyone can do this is because event design oftentimes is empathy based, because the questions that you're asking are about people. And they're about, what do you want these people to do? Do they need to learn something? Is it a skill they need to take away? Is it an attitude or feeling they need to leave with? Is it people they need to meet? So if you're asking those questions, this is a human to human thing. So if you have a pulse and you're breathing and you have thoughts and feelings, anyone can do this. It's just learning to ask the powerful questions and setting the stage as an appropriate place to ask them so people don't feel challenged when you're asking, but really getting to the point of, what do we want to do and how do we want this to happen? And then building that road, getting that framework, and then being able to either take it as a plan or give it to your producers so that they have a roadmap for success as well.
And I love what you said there about questions, because I do think sometimes as a third party, an external event person coming in, I often tell my clients that I'm comfortable being the person who asks the questions because I'm not an intern. Like I feel like I'm nowadays seeing more hesitancy with internal folks because there's politics and hierarchy, and they don't feel like they could ask that question without certain implications being said, versus being like, I can be the third party, like, why are we doing this panel? Because the answer can't be like, because we did it last year and we like doing it. Like, just to ask some of those. So any listeners here, I do encourage you, if you are that third party, like, I feel like you're even more in a position of, I don't know if it's really power, but you should feel more comfortable asking those questions, because that's usually where the value add is, that we can be the people asking. We love tangible examples here on the podcast. So Devon, what's an example of how you've seen event design improve an event?
I think anytime anyone has asked a question, whether or not you're designing or not. So more than likely, anytime you've been to an event or you're in charge of the event where you stop to ask, why are we doing this? And what do we want to happen? Already you've improved the event already. So keep that in mind, planners. You're probably, hopefully already doing this, but if you've seen incremental change, congratulations, you're designing. Some examples that we might all be familiar with, especially for all your listeners who are in the event industry, IMEX and MPI's World Education Congress are both great and very visible examples of who have used event design to improve their events. If anyone who's been to IMEX, the entire Inspiration Hub has been utilizing event design for several years. So if you've been in that space, one year they had kind of a yellow brick road. So if it was like wellness and if it was AI, you can kind of follow your educational path to the place where those education sessions were happening. So again, that's event design. For anyone who's been to Smart Monday at IMEX, that was someone's event design project adding value. MPI is a great opportunity to look at event design as well. Logan, you've actually probably lived in part of that design. One of my favorite examples actually happened in Louisville, where they took walkabouts in downtown Louisville and everyone had headphones on and they were talking about relevant event design topics, but they were outside in the sunshine being stimulated. They sort of broke out of that ballroom, which is something a lot of us have asked for or expressed as wanting to do, to walk, to gather and kind of move and talk at the same time. That's a great learning opportunity. Those are all examples of event design in practice. And hopefully, you know, for those of you who've seen them can kind of think like, oh yeah, that was kind of different. Or, oh yeah, that kind of hit me a different way. Those are great examples.
Thank you for that. That's super helpful. And as we're thinking about this, and especially like a little selfishly as I'm thinking about us, sometimes we get involved in event contracts when everything's already set. They've already made the plans, hopefully they've made the goals, but we have, you know, the lead time where we're more reactionary than proactive. And that's just kind of how it happens sometimes. And so how can event planners or managers who get brought in later in the planning process incorporate event design principles still?
I think it's about having powerful conversations. And even if everything's already set, if there's any wiggle room, or even for your own education, I just want to know. I'm a big fan of context. I'm a huge empath, and I ask a lot of questions because the more context I have, the more I can pull pieces together and kind of wiggle them, be like, okay, I see how A plus B equals C. I kind of see where we're going with this. Without context, there's too much ambiguity. So I don't know what direction to move, what requires more energy, what is just kind of passive. And so you can end up spending your energy on wrong things. So if things are already set, like the venue, well, why did you choose that venue? What was it about it? You know, what sparked your interest? You know, sometimes it's like they had the best rate and the most space. Okay, cool. Is there something special we can do with that venue? You can still ask the questions, but more so, especially if you're brought in and a lot of things are set, you as the third party or vendor or supplier, you should still want to know, what do we want to get out of this? What is that desired behavior? Why do you do this event? Are you stewarding people? Like, hey, thank you for being our customers. This is a stewardship event. We're just thanking you and it's a big party. Well, that's different from, this is a fundraising event and we're trying to there's a call to action here. We want to make a little money. So even how you participate with that event owner, how you engage, what you suggest, like, oh, well, if that's really the case, I'm looking at the RFP here. It seems like we have an opportunity to make some changes. Are you open to having that discussion? Because if education is really the desired effect here, we may be able to do that better if, and then you fill in the blank. So even coming at the end, you should still know who's our key demographic. What do you want them to learn? Are they needing to meet people? Because if they're needing to meet people, all that one-way education, you may be able to say, can I make a suggestion? Or for next year, if this is a desired effect, could I come in a little earlier so we can see what that desired effect is? And then we can be more effective by suggesting the right equipment, suppliers, et cetera, to get you where you want to go.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite with new clients is always, well, like in the future, if you were to do this event again, this is, XYZ. Because yes, sometimes you're a little, the cart is before the horse and you can't stop it. But I feel like you've given us some good, I loved your examples. And I just, putting myself in the shoes of my listeners here, they're always, even more tangible of how they see it, event design applying. What are some examples you have of how you can apply that event design strategy to maybe the attendees, not just like their arrival experience, but whether it's cocktail hour or anything that's before they even get to your program piece, to your stage? Have you seen some helpful ways to incorporate event design?
Absolutely. Especially if you've asked the questions of what do people need to know? So a really good know before you go email is event design, because everyone has questions and there's a lot of that ambiguity. Where am I going? Where do I park? So being able to feed them that knowledge in fun and engaging ways. If you have a theme, this is the best time to employ event design. Because it's like luau themed, and then all of your stuff is just corporate branded with a pineapple, and they show up and everyone gets like a fake plastic. It's like you missed an opportunity here to engage. If you're going to have a theme, weave it throughout. Start with the story so that people are primed and engaged Another opportunity is as connection. You see a lot at like PCMA convening leaders, at WEC, at IMEX, having opportunity to look at who's coming to pre-connect and creating a sense of community prior to even going. That's great event design. It's like, oh, we have a lot of similar things. Do you want to meet for coffee? Great. Here's my number. Let's meet here. For business events. Oh, I see that, you and I could possibly jive on a certain podcast, or we could do business together in that city. Great. Let's meet here. Creating that sense of community ahead of time, allow people to feel kind of psychologically safe upon arriving. If they have less questions, if there's less fear, if they feel that they are belonging to that community already, that's how you put event design in practice before they've even joined you. Remember, everything that touches that stakeholder is part of a journey. We call it the experience journey. From the first time they hear about that event, to every communication in between, to being on site, to leaving, to your last survey, to maybe a follow-up 3 or 6 months down the line. That's all part of a journey. Every touch point you have with that person is an opportunity to instill some event design to add either that knowledge, that skill, change an attitude, or have them meet people. So as long as you remember that each of those touch points is an opportunity, you can do event design from the first time they hear about you to the last time that you've contacted them.
Real quick, Devon, I feel like you gave me a good example of what's not. I feel like there's some events I've been to where they show you who's going, but it's just a list of names and companies, but it's not interactive at all. I can't connect with them. I can't talk to them. And it's one of those where I feel like that person thinks they're checking the community box. But to your point, there's no way for me to actually action any of it.
The same way that like networking, like 80% of people who go to large events say, I go for the people. I go for the community. I want to meet and network. And they're like, great, there's a ballroom over there and we've got some wine and cheese cubes and that's your networking reception, off you go. Okay, that's not networking. That's a room full of wine and cheese and people kind of standing around in awkward circles hoping to interject themselves into conversations. It's like a bad middle school dance. It's awkward. Like, that's not networking. Networking is how you bring people together in those communities to help them feel like they belong. Is there a first timers opportunity? Do they have a chat that you can go to ahead of time? Is it LGBTQ groups? Is it Black event professionals? All of these people want to be a part of that community and feel welcomed and feel activated, but also have an opportunity to cross-pollinate. So mentors and newcomers, being up, having an opportunity to connect. That's how you use event design to say, if people and meeting people is part of this, that room of wine and cheese doesn't connect anyone. It just puts them in a room. It's like putting the chemicals in a place, but not putting them together to see what the reaction is. Good engagement and good networking is what, is that catalyst. It's bringing those people together and seeing what happens, seeing what sparks, if you will.
I love that. And I love what you said about belonging as well. Logan and I recently planned our own little conference that we had, the Better Events Conference. And one of the things that the speakers talked about was making sure your attendees feel welcomed and like they belong there. And to your point, so when Logan and I were planning this, it's like our event. And so I felt like we felt like a lot of ownership on making sure that people felt welcomed and like they belonged to be there. But then sometimes maybe for me, when I'm working for someone else's event, I don't know that I feel that ownership as strongly, but I think that we should. I think that's part of like what you're saying with the event design. Like we can really create something to, even if it's not our event, we're doing it for somebody else, to make sure that that is something that attendees experience. So I like that and wanted to call that out as well. So thank you for sharing. And so we were just talking about like attendees they're entering an event. They're kind of having that experience. So let's get a little bit further. How can you apply event design to your actual stage program as well?
Oh, I love talking about stage programs. So as a professional speaker and an MC, I feel like a lot of times the stage program is where you're connecting with people the most. And generally that opening keynote is the first opportunity you have to connect with them. And those speakers, that MC is the last person they hire. It's like, hold the phone. Let's think about this. And oftentimes, and what's like, again, for professional MCs is a little cringy, is like so-and-so from accounting or like the CFO think that they're a great MC. It's like, not necessarily. Being an MC, a professional speaker, we are professionals. We're trained professionals. We have an art and a science. Our job is to understand, what is that desired behavior? Are we sharing information? Is it about connection? Are we trying to change your attitude? Especially for companies going through growth cycles or reimaginations. If they had a bad quarter and the CFO was like, hey team, what a great year we've had. And you're like, nah, dude, like that. No, So a third party is like, hey, I'm so glad to be here. And I want to, congratulations, XYZ car company. I know it was a hard year, but you're all here together. It's using and understanding what that desired effect is and being a catalyst in order to do that. Panel moderators is another great thing. Sometimes people have, so-and-so be a panel moderator and they don't know how to ask engaging questions, how to steer conversations. Like, okay, I'm just going to ask everyone the same question. Next person, panelist number 4, panelist number 5. And inevitably person's like, well, I echo what all my other panelists said. Like, each one is there for a reason. It's a Petri dish to get people to connect. So how do you pitch each question in order to get the most out of that panel? That's where those professionals come in. And that's where great event design can help you really decide who needs to be on that stage. What are you trying to do with stage presence? Especially thinking through stage presence, it's oftentimes one-way communication. So you're just going out to people. How do you bring them into that experience versus sitting them in a dark room with 5,000 people and it's just talking head after talking head? There's no connection going on. Generally, there's no knowledge share or something they haven't already heard. And at some point, like you said, people have a sweet spot for attention. And the saddest thing I see is sitting in the back of the room with speakers trying to do something and everyone is with their laptops out, their phones out, and they've completely tuned out. The greatest thing is when you design that and every single person's eyes are glued on the stage, that's when you know you've designed that experience well. And understanding how a great MC, a professional panel moderator, a facilitator, or really great speaker can ensure that those phones stay off and those laptops stay closed.
Yeah. So talking about, I feel like you touched on it was like preparation, I feel like is a big key part to this. If you're talking about a great, I mean, even you saying a third party MC, and like you needed all that context, you need all that information. And I think sometimes stage content can be an afterthought for some people. I have one client I worked with this past year that I joked, to Mary's point of like not being the target audience, that they talked about it was for a software and it was a user conference. So people who use this software came, and I didn't believe it, but I had a producer text me that a new how to like add a column got a standing ovation. And I was like, this is an event that's not necessarily for me, but this is clearly something that excites this core group of people that they got this new function and they all stood and clapped and cheered because they were so thrilled to have this. Like that, to your point, is a good example of an event design, I feel like, where they know their audience. And so if you were to give advice to someone who's listening to you and everything you're saying right now, and they're like, I don't know my audience. I don't feel like I have that connection with my stage programming or just my program in general and my audience. What would you tell them, like where to start?
Mostly, all of us have some sort of data from previous events. I love to call that assessment. You got to go back. What was the original impetus for this event? I will also plug anyone who hears it's because we've always done it, right? We've all heard that. Well, we do this because it's how we've always done it. I have found the perfect response to that comment, which is since the last time you changed it. This is how we've always done it since the last time we changed it. Because if you go back 3, 4, 5, even 10 years, that event was reimagined somewhere and it was successful. And somehow along the way, it became the way we've always done it. So there is already precedent for changing and updating any event. And your job is to understand what you're trying to get out of it. A great example is I used to work in higher education and design events specifically for like alumni population. So reunions, commencements, things like that. And one of the things I love to work on was the class of the 50th reunion. Usually it's called Golden something. And one of the examples I use the most is when the classes of the 1950s were going through their 50th reunion, they wanted that nostalgia of those dinner dances they used to have on campus with white dinner jackets and red carnations pinned, as their boutonnieres, dance cards for the ladies. It was this reminder and nostalgia of these beautiful connection moments they had. Well, we got to the classes of the 1960s and they were like, no, that was not part of our experience. They were getting into kind of segueing out of that sort of Pax Romana type of idealism. And they were getting closer to activism. They were kind of shifting into that more free spirit. They weren't really doing that sort of dinner dance style. But if we kept doing it the way we've always done it, we're creating an event that has absolutely no bearing, connection, or want to that audience. So we have to update it. We have to ask, well, what was your college experience like? What would feel nostalgic for you? What would bring you back? What at that event would feel great? I didn't get to do this event, but one of the times I was in charge of the class of the 1970s, where let's say there was a certain funky grass that people really enjoyed, and it was a little bit more, we're supposed to do it that much back then, but everyone did. So I'm like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about weed culture. Let's talk about cultivation. Let's talk about it in terms of historic context, social cultural context. Let's talk about it in terms of modern context. Let's talk about the clothes that was worn, kind of the underground culture about that. Let's put it front and center and have that be something you talk about. And it's like, great, let's talk about it. I kind of realized I was going to get shut down on like edible culture. I'm like, I probably have to sign a ton of waivers to have that happen. But I was thinking from a design perspective of this is a real lived experience and was a huge part of their experience at school. Walkouts, sit-ins. Let's talk about it. Let's recreate one so students can see what your experience was like. That's how you get into design. But again, if you do it the way you've always done it, those classes are going to be like, that has nothing to do with me. I'm not connected at all, so I'm not coming.
I love it. I think that this is so important because, as we get so bogged down by the logistics, sometimes it's hard to like have those ideas or like you're in the brain space of execution. So sometimes that creativity piece might be a little bit harder to access depending on who you are. But I think like those examples are actually really helpful on things that we can do to just tweak a little bit and make a change. So I love that. And as we're talking about creativity, what, if you don't mind sharing, is like one of the most creative things that you've seen an event do with event design? That was a great example, actually, but if you have others as well.
I know, like, I left that institution before I got to do that, but I'm like, this is the best idea ever! Like, and it went crazy, and I actually ran it through a couple of people who graduated in the 70s. They're like, I mean, if you're going to put it front and center, I'd show up at least. Like, and a couple of people who graduated 25th, I'm like, I'd show up. Like, that's cool. And again, it's just putting things front and center. When you want to think about great event design and creativity everyone has. So I just want to start with that. You all are creative, whether it's a little functional something like you had to MacGyver some way to pull your zipper up so you found a paperclip. That's creativity. You all have it in you. Just because we're not Mozarts or Picassos doesn't mean that we're not creative. Creativity is being able to put two and two together and create something a little different. When I think about creative things I've seen at events, adding joy. And oddly enough, adding joy and play at events is something kind of new, but that's where we are most creative. That's what pings the most neurons in our brains. That's what reminds us of being at our best selves because we're experiencing joy. So I've seen people teach juggling at events while they're sharing a topic. And it's kind of like a flop ball and like you have to flip it on your hands. It got a little gamified, like we were kind of competing, but it put everyone in this space of in their bodies, out of their heads. That anxiety goes away. We're creating a sense of, wow, silent discos and dance parties in the middle of the day, petting animals. And I know that's become a little bit more popular, but can you imagine the first person who brought puppies? We're like, what? First puppies? And everyone just goes, I want to pet a puppy. Like, and you're smiling. And what do you remember? You remember those moments that sparked a little joy. And that's where creativity can come in. It's getting into that human factor. And where can you interject moments of awe, of wow, of gratitude, and really hit that human being? Also reminding people, if you need to spark some creativity in your office, there are 2 rules. Number 1, don't do it in your regular workspace. If you want people to be creative, you have to plant the seed of what you want to be creative about, and then you have to leave them alone because that seed has to find its way into their brains and germinate and get ideas going. When you want to share the ideas or share out the ideas, you have to go somewhere else. Don't sit in the boardroom. Please don't do it online if you're not a digital team. Take a walk outside. Go to the Starbucks. And get them into a place where they feel safe being creative because it's not their normal workspace. And the last rule of being creative is everyone's idea is a yes. We don't, what I call squelch. You don't squash people's ideas because as soon as you squish their idea, they will never share another one with you again because basically it's this anthropological, I just got picked off from the herd. So we have like a no squishing, no squelching rule. Like every idea is great. Because with event design, every idea is valid and held up against that blueprint of could this get us to our ideal change behavior? It's also great when the big boss comes down with an idea. I'm like, I think this is a great idea. And you're like, yeah, peacocks sound awesome with a sleight of hand magician. Yeah, boss, that sounds great. we've kind of looked at this blueprint of where the event needs to go. Just do me a favor, where do you see that fitting into this framework? You're not seeing that either. You know what? That's a great idea. Let's put it in our idea area, because I know there's an event coming up where that will hit better, but let's not spend budget items on that right now. It's the best CYA ever. So every idea is a yes. It's just not maybe applicable to every event or that specific one that you're working on.
Oh, Devon, I'm already like, yes, I feel more creative already. You've given us permission. So hopefully our listeners are also feeling some warm fuzzies. Second to last question for you, because I know we could keep talking forever, but you've shared so many, but what is one thing our listeners can implement today in their next event or in their planning process?
The first and immediate answer is creating a safe space for questions. And even if it's a 5-minute coffee call with everyone, with the boss and whoever's in the room, to say, hey, when we ask questions, we drive better results. What healthy boundaries can we have around asking questions that doesn't make anyone feel challenged, but gets us thinking? Can everyone come with one question? Can we have, it's a question opportunity and just have that free space? I think the more permissive we can get in the industry about asking poignant questions will drive everyone forward. Because if we just say yes and keep on rolling, especially for suppliers, especially for third parties, because oftentimes there are people on the planning side who don't know. I mean, how many times is the event other duties as assigned to a fantastic program manager or an excellent executive assistant? Logan, we were talking earlier about skills we have and skills we don't. And it's okay. We talked about MCs. Not everyone is skilled in doing that, but there are those of us who are. So things to implement is understanding not everyone has every skill set. How do we employ or ask questions? Because it's like, oh, I don't know the answer to that. Okay, great. Do you want to talk about it a little bit more? Can I suggest some things? Can we just start a conversation so maybe I can glean that information in a non-challenging way? Because sometimes it's like, my job is just to hire event producers, or they create RFPs that they don't know even what they're creating because they're not sure how to put one in one. So I think everyone can just start making a safe space for questions to ensure we're getting where we want to go.
And that's so important. Absolutely. Listeners, rewind 15 seconds and listen to that again. Because right as you ended that, I'm like, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Snaps for questions.
Yeah. And so with that, this brings us close to the end, but we'd love to ask our guests, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we didn't cover? Or if not, please share a little bit about what you're up to in the industry and where listeners can find you if they want to follow along.
That's awesome. I just want to wish everyone the best in 2025. I feel like we've really turned a corner in terms of making events effective, and just to give everyone permission to change the game. To say, hey, you know what? This event really isn't doing what we have. We're doing more with less. Let's take a pause. Let's take that beat and say, is this working? And if we're not sure, don't spend the money yet. And that's okay. Especially if you've done an annual event. If it's not working, don't do it. It's okay. Do the event that's effective. Make the changes. Be honest and vulnerable. Because when you do spend that money, when you do put your time and treasure, and especially for planners, our time has a value too, friends. You have to know what that is. So when you're spending all this time and treasure, make sure that you're getting and driving those results. So that's my sort of closing statement and giving permissive for questions. A little bit about what I'm doing now. So DMP Creative LLC is a firm that really helps bring event design strategy to clients, and then being able to, as the professional on stage MC, speaker, facilitator, help get to that result. So I love that partnership that I bring to the people I'm working with. It is asking these questions. It is being that third party, getting permission to say, hey, what are we doing? What's going on in the industry right now? What's going on? Like, why do we do this event? Who are these people? What do you want them to do? How can we create the right scripts to ensure that they're in the right headspace? They feel the right way. They're getting that knowledge, and then being able to take that, go on stage and either facilitate, moderate that panel, or just be that presence that they start to trust over time. It's like, oh, there's that MC again. Oh yeah. Oh, I know when she's coming up on stage, something cool is about to happen. And creating that sense of continuity and presence. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm really excited to work with the chapters I'm working with in 2025, the clients that I have the opportunity to work with, calendar is still a little open. So if you want to chat about how I can add value or even have a couple event design conversations, everyone can reach me via my website. So my website is pretty easy. It's DMP Creative LLC. And another way to reach me is on LinkedIn. So it's Devon Pasha, the only one I found so far. So reach out on LinkedIn. Let's connect. Let's just spark a conversation and see what happens. If nothing else, I love sparking good conversations and connections because you never know what happens in that petri dish. And like Logan and Mary, how we sparked a conversation, and now I'm here serving on your podcast and being able to connect with both of you at Better Events.
Thank you so much, Devon. This was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a great way to spend a day.
And that brings us to our bonus tip, listeners, which, Mary, you have this week.
I certainly do. Okay, our bonus tip actually does have to do with our topic, which is not always the case, but here we go. So, if you feel like you're recreating the wheel sometimes when it comes to your process for event planning, so this is something that I've been dealing with lately. We created in some data on our agendas. So basically, we were looking at like what do we normally talk about, like the first week of planning, and then the second week of planning, and then the third. So we're going back at agendas and just kind of compiling like what are our common conversations during this time. Now, if you have experience with the industry, you might just be able to show up and be able to wing it. But our bonus tip for today is to encourage you to put some strategy behind this process to improve the process. So get that data, take a look, and then see where you can start adding maybe new, additional, or helpful conversations during these times that you're meeting with other individuals so you can improve your value. And I think during this time, you could also have more room to be creative and talk about these ways that you can do event design, which I was not planning on saying, but it absolutely goes with our topic today. So that is our bonus tip for today.
Thank you so much, Mary. Yes, we love when it just happens to tie in or you were inspired there to tie it in at the end. So that brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. As always, we love connecting you directly on LinkedIn, like Devon mentioned. Just let us know that you heard about us from the podcast. We love hearing from you. And if you want more Better Events content, like our monthly bonus episodes, you can join our private community on Substack. Just check out the show notes. And as always, we thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.